Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Reset with Raven podcast. I am your host, Raven M. Harris, and I am excited that you are here. Now, this episode is different from any of our other resets. This episode is about resetting the way you interact with people. Today, we have guest Alan Stevens. Alan is a communication specialist and an international profiling expert. So you ever wonder, why do people do what they do? Their body language? Can you read them? What makes them tick? You got to turn into this episode. Welcome, international profiling expert and body language expert, Alan Stevens. Let's start by talking to us about what exactly you do.
Well, I help people to build stronger relationships, most of all, and I do that through teaching them how to read other people. If you think about it, everything in life is based on the relationships we have. If we don't have good relationships, we don't have good connections with our family. If we don't find the right work, we have problems in the workplace as well. And so I teach people how to read each other, and I do that first of all. Your facial features tell me your personality. And the way that works, if you lift weights, you're going to build muscles in your body, like repetitive movements of, say, a bicep, you'll grow the bicep. And everything we feel inside, we express outwardly. So you put those together, when you're thinking and concentrating, you'll pull expressions over and over. And so your face becomes a roadmap of how you like to think and process, which is your personality. Then when I've got that, I know how to change the way I like to be spoken to match the way that you want to be spoken to. And then I've got the body language and expressions that give me feedback. Have I read you right? Is there something emotionally going on? And are you telling me the truth? But where some people use the micro expressions and body language as a lie detector, I use it as a truth seeker, because I want to know why you're not telling the truth. What's behind that? Is it an emotional reason? So it's not just looking at somebody as being a criminal, but what else is going on? If I can connect with them at that more of a soul level, I'm able to help them through the issues they've got. And if I'm selling products, for instance, there's going to be a lot more trust that they have in me, and I'm more likely to be able to build a relationship with them and also get sales.
I love that. You said a truth seeker, not a lie detector. It's like using it, I guess, for good or in a different way, I guess, than what we may typically think about it. So I'm curious, how does this relate to the phrase you hear, like someone's poker face? Like, are you able to evade like the poker face? Can you see like underneath that?
There's a lot of things that are given away. See, we process about 2 million bits of information every second through all of our senses, taking things in the moment, but we process about 134 bits. So you can try and concentrate on not giving things away in your expressions or in your body. But the thing is that there's too much going on that you're going to give it away somewhere. Plus the micro expressions, little twitches on the face that give away what somebody really feels, they happen in the moment between something happening around them when they respond unconsciously to when their conscious mind steps in and shuts it off. So before they can even think about it, their face has already given that information away. And so it's very hard to actually hide things, the little tells that will always be there. All you've got to do is be astute enough to be able to pick them up.
Okay. So is this like, so tell us more about how you got into this field. And I guess one of the things that's coming to my mind is like, I took a course back in college, and it was called like the psychology of emotions. Where is psychology playing a role in all of this? And then I guess the second part of it is, how did you get, so well studied and experienced in this field?
Well, first of all, when we use the word psychology, everybody thinks of psychologists. But the whole thing is we're using that word really where we should be using the science. So the science behind it. So it's not a specific field for psychologists. I'm not a psychologist, but yet I train psychologists on how to profile people and to make connections faster than what they can do with their relevant training that they've had in their courses. It's a science in that, well, if you think about it, as I said, anything you feel on the inside, you're going to express outwardly. That's why the expressions will be there. The body language will be there. They're two sciences. The facial features, that's around your biology. We know that any repeated expressions that we pull over and over are going to create ridges and crevices on our face that give a history of how we like to think and process. So what I've done is I've taken 4 sciences, put them together, and turned them into the way they're delivered into an art form. And so, but why I got involved in this was because I was dreadful. I'd been through 2 divorces, I've been through a lot of broken relationships, and it became a necessity. I even had business partners who emptied the bank out. So if I was going to survive, I decided I needed to understand people better. And I had been using things like psychometric profiling, Myers-Briggs and DISC, where you ask people questions. And I've been using those since the 80s, but still not, when people answer questions, they try and second guess them. I wanted to be able to realize in the moment somebody's personality and also understand their emotions at that time. And working with a company in my hometown where they were teaching people currency trading, and none of their students were making money, even though the trainer was a professional trader and a brilliant instructor. We knew it was the psychology side of things. And when we asked people questions to work out their personality, they didn't fit it. So I decided that I needed a better system. And that's when I looked at the facial features and the facial expressions, and then created rapid trait profiling, which is now unique worldwide. So teaching people how to do that. But as I said, I wasn't good at it. Everybody is a born profiler, except for a very small percentage of children, those that can't recognize facial features or expressions. Everybody else, we knew how to recognize faces. That's how we survived. We look at somebody, we knew whether they were family, whether they were a friend, whether they were a foe. We then also need to read their expressions. So once we understood that, we realized that everybody was able to read people. But as we got older, when we're looking at playing games and sports and going to school and everything else, we shift our focus. And when we shift our focus, we're no longer focusing on reading people. And it's like any muscle. We don't work it, it atrophies. And so by being able to bring your attention back to it, really all I do is teach people what they already knew when they were young children, but have forgotten about over time. So when I look at this, anybody can learn how to read people with the right instructions.
Is it, and when you say with the right instructions and anybody can learn, is it a series of, is it months? Is it a series of courses? Is there a particular classroom work? What's that process like?
Well, I work with 3 areas or 3 groups of people. I work with individuals and families. I work in businesses to help them build their culture, build their relationships, train the people in the right roles and everything else. And I work in the sales area. But in all of those, I can do personal profiles for people where I profile the individual, I profile a work colleague, a child, or anything like that. I've got short courses where people can learn little bits at a time, and I've got master programs. So it all depends on what the person needs. I do have one course, which is for school teachers that look at 3 traits in particular that we will find don't really fit the education system. And so many kids that we are labeling with conditions like ADHD and Asperger's and autism, really we change their environment, they're no longer affected, or the effect that they have is much greater reduced. And if we can take them off their medication, they thrive and grow faster. That particular course takes about an hour and a half for a teacher to get through or a parent to go through. So it can be really short. It can be specific to a particular need, or my focus at the moment is to create and train my competition. So I'm looking for great coaches who want to learn the skills so they can go out and become the leaders in their fields, and that way propagating what I'm doing so it doesn't fall off the planet when I fall off the planet, so to speak. Because that's one of the biggest problems. You can pioneer a field, but if you don't pass that knowledge on, when you expire, it expires as well. And so I want to make sure I leave that legacy, and there's plenty of people doing what I'm doing, but they have to be doing it right. So I really need to train them. I feel I got a moral obligation to do that.
So you've combined, just making sure I understand it, you've combined 4 sciences like that already exist, and you've kind of like developed a program around this?
Yep. So started understanding, well, the facial features, it tells me the hobbies and sports that somebody will match their personality. It tells me what careers will suit them as well. So some people might learn the facial features to use it in sales. They may use it to look at, if they're a sports coach, for instance, they might use it for the sports. I cover all areas, and I look at then combining the traits. So the people who taught me, I've looked at what they've done and I've taken a little bit further. I've started looking deeper into it and going, okay, instead of just looking at the individual traits, but then bringing all the traits together and understanding, being able to look at somebody in a moment, be able to recognize their trait as they walk past me in the street. So know their personality. And I can do that by looking at what stands out the most, what stands out second, third, fourth, fifth, etc. Combine those, how they interact with each other. And that was something that I now train people how to do, which wasn't in part of my training when I learned how to read the facial features.
And do you have like the same effect versus it being virtually versus in person?
Well, it's when I work with people in person, if they're doing the master program, for instance, we'll go to cafes, we'll go to shopping malls and places like that, because we've got all those resources walking around that we can profile. And that becomes one way of learning it that way. The other one is if I'm doing it over Zoom or over the internet like this, the person, we record the session, so they get the notes in the recording, but we then look at photographs and we work with those instead. I've trained people totally on face-to-face. I've trained them totally on the internet, and I've trained them a combination of both. And in every case, they've all picked up a lot and they've been able to take it further. So it doesn't really matter which way, because people on the other side of the world, I can't do it face-to-face. It has to be done virtually. And they get the same results, but they just learn in a different way. So I adapt every course that I deliver to the person's personality that I'm working with. So I always adjust it. No two people have been taught the same way, even if they've been face-to-face.
Is there a way? I'm just curious. I know you mentioned like your facial expressions and then just things, I guess, within your body language. Can people, I don't want to say trick, but can they like not beat the system? Is there a way to kind of maneuver that, or does like your body always like give it away? I'm just curious.
There's always going to be something there. You just have to be observant to take it in. The biggest issue, most people will try and focus in on somebody and really stare and try and pick it up. Well, if you're focusing on just the face, you're missing the body. You're missing what the arms and legs are doing. The softer you can make the look that you've got on somebody, you take in as much as you can, you really expand your vision. Then and you just relax with it, the unconscious mind's going to trigger things. You'll see things and you go, well, what did I see there? And then you'll start to build a picture. So it's extremely hard to hide the information, because as I said, there's about 2 million bits of information going on every second, but only 134 bits that we're processing. So the more that you relax, the more the other person feels that you're okay with what they're saying, but which will let them, you can start to then look for changes. You'll pick things up there quickly as well. So the whole idea is to relax when you're profiling people, because that way they don't even know that you're reading them as well.
Like make sure they're comfortable and you're comfortable. Very interesting.
That's
So we often hear the phrase like your network determines your net worth. So how can we build deeper or better relationships personally and professionally, like applying this?
Well, when it comes to whether it be personal or business, people talk about business relationships and they talk about personal relationships. Every relationship is human to human. There's no such thing as a business relationship, because businesses don't talk to each other. People talk to each other. So if you think you've got great business relationships, but the relationships at home aren't great, I guarantee your business ones aren't great either. You think they are, but they're not, and vice versa. So if you're good in one area, you'll be good in the other. If you're not good in one area, and you think you're good in the other one, you're probably not. So go and check those out. But relationships are the foundation of everything. So focusing on the other person is the most important thing. They say that you've got 2 ears and 1 mouth. And I tell everybody, well, you've also got 2 eyes, 2 ears and 1 mouth. Use them in that proportion. So because the nonverbals make up about, 93% of the communication. The words are only worth 7%. The actual words themselves, the way they're spoken, is part of the tone of voice and the body language, etc., the non-verbals. But it's the words themselves are only worth 7%. They're absolutely necessary, equally important to the rest of it, but they give the least amount of information. So the non-verbals are the most important information as far as, or give you the most value in the conversation. And so using your eyes and your ears will take in a lot more. But when you use your mouth, ask questions. I often say to people, ask every question you can think of and then ask one more question. Because most people, as soon as people start to talk about something that's going on, most people, the stats are showing that it's about 19 seconds before somebody jumps in and gives advice. There's no way you can get enough information in 19 seconds to give somebody valuable advice. Because what it does, somebody said something, it's triggered something in you, and therefore you then jump in and try and fix the problem. But it's not the problem. It's your problem that's got nothing to do with their problem. So by listening and then taking it in, asking as many questions as you can, and always ask the next, and people say, well, how can you ask one more question after you've asked all the questions? The last one is, from what you've been telling me, this is what I've been understanding. Have I got that right? Now, if you have, the person will say to you, yes, and you will have rapport with them really fast because they know that you've been listening to them, you've been focused on them, and therefore they appreciate that. If not, then they start to correct where you've got it wrong. But now you're in a conversation. And so you're not actually talking at them, you're having a conversation with them, which again builds rapport. By not talking, like giving advice, but by asking questions, you build rapport faster than any other way. And so I always teach people, take that time to do that. Remember that if you're feeling somebody else's pain, don't try and fix it, because they need to go through that. They need to express it. This is why men are very good at fixing problems. Where we go wrong is we don't acknowledge the emotional empathy that somebody's going through at the time, the pain they've got. Women are very good at that. But then men would just rush in and try and fix it. I always say to the men, right, acknowledge the pain the other person's feeling. You're feeling it yourself. I know you don't like it, but acknowledge that it's the other person's pain. Once you've done that, then ask if you can fix it. Do you want me to listen, or do you want me to fix the problem? And let the person tell you what they want. That way, men would have much better relationships with their partners, because the partners would know that they care, that they're focused on helping them to feel better, not just get away from the pain that they're feeling from their partner. And so there's so much that can go into that communication. And so women, as I said, young girls, when they first are born, they're focused on faces. The boys are focused on everything that's going on, mobiles or whatever else might be hanging in the room. And that's why girls are usually better at reading other people and also connecting, feeling other people's emotions, because they're focused on the other person. Boys are focused on everything. That's why we're behind the girls. But we have the ability to fix the problems that quite often the girls don't have, because they're too involved in feeling the other person's pain and empathizing with that pain. But you don't fix the problem. As I say, a problem shared is a problem halved. It's not. A problem shared and not acted upon is a problem magnified, because everybody gets into it and it builds up even greater. But a problem that we recognize and then look at finding a solution, then we've halved the problem, because now we've got two people working on a solution. We're working forward, not staying back in the pain. And this is where men and women in the communication and being able to read each other, that can change the relationships dramatically between couples. And also improve a lot of issues that we're having on social media as well.
Wow, you just said so much, like especially the part about asking like that follow-up question. Did I understand you correctly? I feel like that was like, even what you just gave us was like a master class on communication as well as interviewing. When you're talking with people and you're like, oh, what do I ask next? Well, let me recap. Did I understand that correctly? And if there are any areas where there may have been some disconnect or may have gotten it incorrect, it's like, oh, this is that person's opportunity to say, actually, no, this is what I meant here, or you misunderstood. Wow, I needed that. I took that in. That was huge. And another thing that I want to point out that you just said that, like, I was like, oh my gosh, that was like a truth bomb when you said about men and sometimes not acknowledging. Like, and I thought about there's often within women you hear, I feel like kind of like similar, like hearing on Lifetime, well, I don't feel heard.
Mm.
You hear that so many times. So that for all of our men listening, that was also a great teachable moment that we just received. One of the things that also came to my mind too is when I'm thinking about like interactions and building these relationships, what would you suggest for someone who is trying to understand how to read the room? They're coming into environments because I think this is really powerful and important right now as you hear the term we're outside, the world is opening back up, so more functions, people are having more functions and trying to move away from virtual just to give people an opportunity to be back in the presence of people. So
Mm.
I have conversations with some of my friends. We're talking about, well, whoa, like what's it like to gather again? What do you think for people that need some assistance or need some guidance on reading the room? Where can they start if we're trying to reintegrate back into, I guess, whatever our new normal is?
One of the things there's probably a lot more books on out there is things like body language. And body language, you can watch from a distance. You can see people across the other side of the room and the way they're interacting with each other. And you're looking for the where they're congruent, or there's you also look for things in clusters. Like one indicator doesn't give you the whole story. It's like one facial feature doesn't give me the person's personality. It gives me a building block. So the more I can pull together in what I'm seeing, the more I can then believe that everything is what as I see it. When I grew up, there used to be in most of the lounge rooms in houses, I had three little plaster ducks, a big one at the bottom, smaller one, and a smaller one again, and it looked like they were flying off in the one direction. And the saying we always had used to say was, "Get all your ducks in a row." And that's what I say when it comes to reading people. Don't just go on one indicator, but look for as many indicators as you can and see if they're all pointing in the same direction. And if they are, then you're able to, feel that what you've read is correct. It's like if somebody's got their arms folded, it could be because they're cold. It could be that they're intimidated by the people who are around them, not necessarily that they don't like you. But if their feet are facing towards their door, their body's leaning back and tilted away from you, you start adding all those little indicators together. It's pretty obvious that person doesn't want to be around you. But also look for changes. If somebody's standing there talking to me and they've got their arms folded, but they're showing interest in what I'm doing and everything else, I know that the arms folded is just giving themselves a little warm hug, because a lot of people, when they hear what I do, they get intimidated. And I'm going, well, you shouldn't, because you're doing this all the time anyway. All I do is bring the science back to it, so you're no longer making misjudgments based on your biases or things that may have happened to you in the past, but you can now understand what you're really receiving. Is it something that your unconscious mind is telling you that exists, or is it a bias from something that's happened to you in the past, and this is now reminding you of that situation? So with that, getting all those indicators together, if somebody's standing there, they've got their arms folded, but they're showing interest, and as we're talking, they unfold their arms, I know now that they no longer need to give themselves a little warm hug. They're no longer intimidated, that they feel more comfortable around me. So I know that we're building rapport. So I look for the changes that give me information as well. There is so much going on that when you stop and you relax and go, okay, instead of just focusing on one thing that I saw, but let's see what else I'm seeing, you start to get the full picture, and you'll get a more accurate picture.
It's almost like you were in line what I was thinking, because I was just going to ask you, how has that impacted your interactions with people? Like when you tell them what you do, like are you ever like, I don't know, at a networking event or on a plane, and people like, what do you do? What have been some of the responses? Do people get nervous? Do you see people like be very poised? What's been that
I can see them
response?
getting very self-conscious because thinking, what can he see and everything else. And the thing is, when they start getting a little bit worried, and they start to imagine that I might be trying to see their deep secrets and everything else, they'll get nervous, and that's when they'll give away a lot more information. It's like, this is one of the reasons why the what do they call it, polygraph tests don't work. They're based on your physiology. And so if you feel that you're going to be misjudged, that you're innocent, but you feel that they're going to think you are, you'll give away false positives. And so they'll then realize, you'll be worried that they're going to think that you're telling a lie when you're not. And the end result is the equipment will pick up and say you're telling a lie. Somebody who thinks they're really good at telling lies, they will always give false negatives. They will be, people will see that they're comfortable and the machine won't pick it up. But as I was saying there about reading people, if you start to feel nervous and you're a con artist, for instance, that's when you'll start to leak information. But it's also the way in which I ask questions, with open questions, probing questions, and closed questions. The open questions: explain, describe, tell. So that person will give you as much information as they like, and they're real comfortable. It's also where the eyes move when somebody's sourcing information. And at that point, I can pretty much benchmark, which way they look to remember something, or whether they look to create an answer. And as I'm talking to them, then I'll start using the why, what, when, where, hows, and etc. And with that, the 5 W's and the H, and I'll bounce around with those and go, okay, well, as you were saying back here, what about this and what about that? So I'm all over the place, because you can't tell a lie from the back, from the end back to the front. You've got to start the front and go to the end. And so if you bounce around, it makes it difficult for them to think. All of a sudden, they start leaking more information. So that when you get to the last part, the closed questions, where you're looking for a yes or no answer, you've filled in, they'll give you what they can, they'll leave gaps. The 5 W's and the H, you narrow the gaps down and they start getting more nervous, their body's going to give away a lot more. Then when you get to the yes and no answers, that's when you'll really start to see the micro expressions, and the body language really starts to come out. So using this is why I put the 4 techniques together, because they complement each other so well, and what we say, magnify the results that you can get from all of them together than you could get from each of them separately.
And recap for us what those, because I want to make sure I didn't miss, what are these 4 components or 4 techniques?
Well, the facial features that tell you the person's personality, and it's all about personality, not character. There used to be a belief that certain bumps on the head would be criminals and things like that, the thing they call phrenology. It was started by psychologists and then finally debunked by the psychologists, but it led on to neuroscience studies. But I'm talking about the personality, because personality is how we like to do things and how we like to behave and process, whereas character is what we're thinking and processing. So 2 people can look very similar. One could be a saint, one could be a sinner. So that's the first thing to remember. If somebody reminds you of somebody who's done the wrong thing by you in the past, has a similar appearance, don't misjudge them. That's why it's important to be able to have the other skills, so you can work out, are they the same as the other person or are they different? But we know that they will process information and behave in a similar way, but what they're thinking and processing will be different. So facial features give me that. Then I know how to change the way I like to be spoken to match the way the other person does. So I know how to use the language. I know if somebody just wants the overview, the least amount of information, and I'm analytical, or I need a lot of information to make a decision, I know not to inundate them with too much information. So I know how to give them the overview and say to them, look, you can ask the questions that you want to ask after this, but if there's something there that you haven't asked, it's all right if I tell you that then. That way they know I'm going to be talking with them, not at them. So I can take all of that information. So that's where the language comes in. And then I get the feedback from the body language and the expressions that will then confirm, did I read them right in the first place? Is there something emotionally going on? And lastly, are they telling me the truth?
Could you have 2 out of 4 or 3 out of 4? What does that look like when are you always, could you be unsure? Could you say like, I'm getting 50% of this, and I'm two out of 4 is giving me one impression or one thought, and then the other 2 out of 4, or is it typically like all or nothing?
Well, the facial features, I said, gives me the foundation to start with. That's probably the most important of all the skills, but probably the least recognized worldwide. because shows like the Lie to Me and The Mentalist, and that gave body language and expressions a great big kick. Really took them off, and everyone thought they were quite sexy because you're catching lies and things like that. But the most powerful of the lot is being able to recognize someone's personality and therefore knowing how to talk to them, because that's the beginning of building the relationship. The others are then feedback. If I read somebody, then naturally I know how much information they need. So my language is always going to be aligned to that. And then the feedback, well, it depends on what my vision is at the time, how focused I am on watching that person, or is there other stuff going on? If I'm at a party, the facial features will be turned on because I want to build a relationship with the people. I want to get the language right. But as far as picking up whether they're telling me the truth, I'm at a party. Everybody lies at a party. They're telling stories. They're embellishing, they're telling jokes and everything else. All of that is lies. So I turn that off because I'm not the lie police, because I want to enjoy the party as well. But if I'm in an interview or an interrogation or something like that, negotiations, then that part's going to be switched on because I want to get the feedback and know that the person is being truthful. So I'm selective with the body language and the expressions, but the language I use and the facial features, they're always turned on. Because if I got them turned on, the other person always feels more comfortable because I'm now talking to them the way they like to be spoken to. And it's all about, profiling is all about showing respect to the other person, not using it to manipulate them, but to build a relationship with them. So you've got to respect the other person in the process.
Got it. And I'm glad you mentioned the ability to turn that off, because when you talked about, I want to enjoy the party, enjoy the experience, one of the things kind of that was kind of coming in my mind is like, well, is this exhausting to every environment or every person you interact with to like be going through that list of 4, or are you able to be like, okay, I'm just going to enjoy the moment, enjoy the experience? But it sounds like there's especially the facial features that never really gets turned off, because you can't help but
That's
notice,
it.
right?
Well, see, if you went to a party and you couldn't communicate with people, you were always talking and saying the wrong thing, that would be exhausting. There'd be also, no enjoyment in that meeting at all. But if you're able to read somebody's facial features and know how they like to be treated, that takes the pressure off. It actually adds to your enjoyment for you and enjoyment for the other person as well. And so it's something that doesn't take any energy, but it makes the whole situation so much more enjoyable. And that's why that's the one that I like to teach people, because in my master programs, we spend, out of the 13-week program that I run, we're spending at least 9 to 10 weeks just on that area, and then using the other to confirm what we're seeing with that. I know that, as I said, Lie to Me and other shows like that, really made those reading expressions and body language really sexy and very interesting to people. But, it's not where the focus is. If you want to build relationships, the focus is in the facial features and the language you use when you're talking to the person. And that's, as I said, the facial expressions and the body language, I really only use as a confirmation. They're secondary as far as I'm concerned. But, of course, shows on TV make things quite sexy and very interesting and popular. But quite often the things that are most important in life are the things that we don't put any time into, and we wonder why we have so many issues and problems. If I'd been able to read the facial features, before my divorces, I'm sure my life would have been completely different. I wouldn't be the person I am today, which probably be a loss, but hey, there you go.
Yeah, it's very interesting. It's one of the gentlemen that I was talking to, and an upcoming episode was just talking about back to basics. It's very, very interesting that you bring that up. I know you have several projects that you work on and that you lead, and I want to make sure that we at least touch on them. Can you tell us about, I know you have is it the Campfire Project, and then is it the Business of Smiles?
Yeah, what actually happened 4 years ago, especially working with men in business, and I was asking them, about their business and how they felt about things, I found that most men were telling me that the one word that described them was confused. And I said, well, confused with what? And they said, well, in our personal relationships, we thought our job was to go out and build the resources and feed the family. But now we're being told we're physically and emotionally absent. And I went, okay, and what else? And they said, well, in the workplace, with all the gender equality and political correctness, we're always on tender hooks worrying about whether we've said the right thing or not, and whether we get into trouble when we don't mean to cause trouble. We don't mean to be arrogant or anything else. And I realised that men were getting frustrated, and that frustration in some cases led to anger, and in other cases led to bullying in the workplace and even domestic violence. You don't fix a problem by beating the bullies up. You need to understand them, you educate them, etc., and that's how you change the situation. So I thought, right, we need a safe place where men could come and sit down and tell their stories. Somebody to hold their space, not criticise them, not judge them, not to counsel them, not to advise them, but just to be the eyes and ears and listen. And so I started interviewing men one-on-one around the world, and then brought them into panel discussions. But I never wanted it to be a men's group. So I started it out, first of all, as with women in the group, but mainly to get the men talking first of all, because I felt that they needed to lead the way, to felt that there was value in what they were doing. And so when we started running panel discussions and talking about pornography, masculinity, femininity, the toxicity of all of those things, and other subjects, the women were sending me personal messages going, we love these guys. We've never heard men talk this way before. Can we get involved? Or how can we get involved? And I went, put your hands up, been waiting for it. So I brought the women into the one-on-ones, then brought them into the panel discussions with no subjects off the table. We will talk about menstruation, menopause. We've talked about, does size matter in the bedroom? And in just under 4 years now, it'll be in August, it will be 4 years. We've had about 500 hours of one-on-ones and panel discussions. Not once has there been any bigotry, sexism or racism, and not once has anybody been disrespectful to anybody else, proving that when you set the agenda, the end result is that everybody can behave in the right way. And anybody can join the Facebook group. Anybody can then put their hand up to do a one-on-one. And if they've done a one-on-one, then they can join the panel discussions. And they happen to be a coach or a psychologist or anybody else, and they're running a program, they can then advertise that in there as well. From there, a couple of the guys, my job as a leader is to make myself redundant by raising others up to do what I can do, but hopefully do it better than I've ever done it. And so to do that, there's a number of people, both male and female, who have stepped up to do run the one-on-ones and run panel discussions. And in that process, we've now got them doing that work, which has allowed me to do other things. But one of the guys in there, I introduced him to another friend of mine in the group. 2 years ago, they started a group called the Business of Smiles. And in that, they go out and talk to people and start conversations on mental health. And they're talking to men and women around the world. They walk along with very bright yellow socks with a lot of little black dots all over them, a smiley face. The black dots, the tough times you're going to go through in your life, you're not going to get out of them. They're always going to be there. But the yellow, the warmth of the winter sun, the camaraderie, the support you have from other people when you've got the right support, they just go up to people and thank them for the efforts they've put in through COVID and everything else, and talk about how it must have been a tough time, and then gift them a pair of socks and then tell them the story about the socks, and that leads on to discussions. Their target next, they've already done a few runs, but the next one is from Sydney to Melbourne, 1,300 kilometres, where they'll do that over 2.5 weeks, go through all the villages and towns on the way, talk to people on the side of the road, hand out about 10,000 pairs of socks and start 10,000 conversations on mental health to remove the stigma, because everybody is on the scale at one point or another. There are 4 things. We all suffer, we have suffered, or we are suffering. We all wear masks. We all pretend we're not wearing a mask, and we're all a product of our childhood experiences, all the good and the bad. So when you understand that, everybody is on the scale at one point or another. It just depends on where we're on it today. Some people, because of their situations, are down the negative end, the tough end of it, whereas most of the others were up the front end. But we see there's a stigma because we're worried about ourselves sliding down that line. But everybody can do that. Once you understand that, you can have more compassion for the other person. You can then have conversations with them, and that helps your mental health in the process as well, by just helping other people and understanding other people. And that's what the 2 groups are about. bringing the world together as a global community.
No, that is wonderful, and it's in alignment with a mission that I have to end suffering in silence. So I
Mm.
just love what you're doing, and I love that you brought the point that we're all along the spectrum at some point in time, and probably have teetered along that based on what we're going through at that point in time in our lives. So thank you so much, because I think that again it reminds us to extend grace and
Mm.
compassion. So I love that. Before I ask my final question, please let everyone know how they can keep in touch with you and find out more about the work you're doing, the Campfire Project, and the Smiles. Tell us more how we can learn more about that.
Well, my business website is my personal name. It's alanstevens.com.au for Australia. Alan, ALAN, and Stevens, STEVENS. That's where they can find out all about the profiling side of things. But if they also put the / and the word free, FREE, after the website address, that'll take them to my training platform where they can get a free course. It'll give them a couple of traits they can learn how to go and test out for themselves. As I say to people, I can sound very convincing and everything else, but you don't know whether what I'm telling you is true until you try it for yourself. So there's that free offer to them. The Campfire Project is just that as well. The website is thecampfireproject.com.au. That'll tell them about the one-on-ones, it'll tell them about the panel discussions, and it then has a link to the Facebook page where they can come in and join in the conversations.
Love it, love it. And our last question for today is, what is the greatest lesson you've learned in your reset journey?
The greatest one, it actually came from one of the coaches in UCLA, John Wooten, and that was the most important thing I'll ever learn is the next thing I learn after I think I know everything. I'm 70 years old now and I'll never stop learning.
Oh, I love that. That's so good. That's so good. Never stop learning. Oh, thank you so much, Alan. I appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. But one other thing I always like to leave with people, another important philosophy is everything you do for yourself dies with you, but what you do for others and for the community isn't always will be eternal. And that's why the way I do my work is all about helping other people.
I love that. That is a wonderful close. You all help someone else by sharing this powerful message. Thank you so much for listening. Remember, a reset is always available to you.